Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to be talking about WandaVision episodes 1 and 2. We will start spoiler free since it is a new show, it's a new premiere. I'm not sure how much we could spoil at this point, but we'll do a spoiler wall before we get to any of the juicy bits. But this is the first of the MCU TV shows made exclusively for Disney Plus. And while technically we've started MCU TV shows before, they very quickly felt disconnected. These are produced by Kevin Feige. They are promised to be relevant to the movies and even start with the Marvel Studios logo, all that jazz.
Just the fact that they're on Disney Plus as opposed to, okay, here's a network that, yes, Disney technically own, but it's a bit different.
More so than that, the fact that we actually have characters headlining who are from the movies also feels very different.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that this just feels like a typical Marvel movie. Any way, shape, or form. In fact, it doesn't.
It feels like nothing Marvel have ever put out before.
No. And I suppose before I even get to my opinion of what this is, regardless of what I think of this, if these Disney Plus shows let them do weird things that are this different from what they've done in the past, then that can only be a good thing. So
yeah, regardless of opinion on quality or anything else, before we get to that, this is undeniably the most unique creative vision that any MCU thing has had so far.
Yeah. So the premise, at least, of the first couple of episodes here is that, for reasons unknown, and this was just kind of clear in the trailer as well, but for reasons unknown, Wanda and Vision, who, if you recall, is dead from the movies, are living in a 1950s style sitcom, and that is very much the premise of how these first two episodes operate, to the point where they're in 4:3 black and white. The first episode even has like a sort of moment where the Marvel Studios logo is in the 235, big cinematic widescreen, and then it closes in and changes by the end of it. So it makes it very clear that it is shifting. And we have heard from the early reviewers who got the first 3 episodes that the end of episode 3 seems to imply that the format will be changing a bit after that, which I kind of expected to anyway, just given the stuff that it's hinting and teasing and whatnot.
Yeah, I think in the trailer before there was like a shot of Elizabeth Olsen in like different outfits of like different decades. Obviously this is all like 50s now, but there was like 60s, 70s, 80s and such going on. So so that's kind of where we are premise wise. They're living, and to the point where they're actually telling the almost the style of jokes that would be in an old sitcom are very much in these couple of episodes. Most of it's set in their house. They've got the neighbor who's kind of a guest character. He's dealing, Vision is dealing with his job and pretending to be human. But a lot of the jokes are very much. It was almost, even though I didn't really watch sitcoms from that era per se, a lot of the tropes and the style of joke telling evolved a bit, but it was still kind of there in the 80s and 90s. So a lot of the sitcoms I grew up watching did have a lot of the setup and payoff that this couple of episodes was really playing with. Particularly the first one, I felt there was a lot of things that were set up really well in this early episode that then paid off. And it's kind of this weird line that it's walking where, like, I don't know how to describe it, where the jokes are kind of predictable a lot of the time, but they're kind of supposed to be because it's playing on these old sitcom tropes. But because we're dealing with characters who actually have superpowers, who are not really from a sitcom, it's kind of doing this, playing both sides of the line, where it's kind of being funny at times, but it's kind of not sometimes. But when it's not being funny, it's kind of funny because it's not being funny, or because it's poking fun at the tropes. Or there's a weird. I think I follow what you're saying there.
There's a weird pull in the middle where the usual rules of comedy don't really apply in the same way. And why something's funny is not funny because the core joke itself is that funny. It's more because of the meta, way that the joke is funny. It's very unique. I'd heard a couple of comparisons before it launched, just in the last couple of days. The words David and Lynch were mentioned, and while I do think it's bold to say that, and at no point does this actually feel like a David Lynch thing, I can see why the comparison is made. There's a couple of specific things I can tell why someone has made that comparison.
Yeah, I can too, and I would say it's David Lynch filtered through Hitchcock for those moments.
Okay.
That's kind of how I describe those points.
Well, it's not even just. it's not just those specific points though. I think I mean is that what it is generally, and then with those specific points in there, is actually why I would say it can be compared to David Lynch. But I do think the offbeat humor of David Lynch, and then the sort of the darker, more existential moments of David Lynch, there's just such a spark and unique feeling to what David Lynch does that almost nothing. I mean, you could say something that's kind of David Lynch-esque, and maybe this is kind of David Lynch, but it's still, it's in the context of MCU, so it's a bit easier, it's a bit lighter. But
to be fair, even most things that are David Lynch-esque are significantly more digestible than most actual David Lynch works.
That's not a knock on the show. That is just making it very clear that I think there has to be a caveat when anyone ever describes something as David Lynch-esque, because even if technically, on paper, objectively, there are things you can compare to David Lynch, there is a unique feeling to his work that no one has ever really been able to mimic.
Indecipherability.
It's more than that.
It is. I'm just making fun.
I'm talking about positive qualities. I mean, indecipherability.
That was a positive quality.
I mean, it can be positive. I mean, I think a lot of bad things are also indecipherable. It's just
that's true. Yeah,
just for not intentional reasons. So I suppose So what did you think? Did you like the first 2 episodes of WandaVision?
I have very strong conflicting opinions. In that, I'm very interested in what it's doing, and I'm very and I love how unique it is. But at the same time, I kind of hate watching it. Like, I don't enjoy the sitcoms, but part of me is like, well, it's going to get past this. But all the 60s sitcom, 50s, whatever, I don't enjoy it at all. It was kind of grating on me, and I was like, oh, this is kind of tedious. But there are moments where I'm like, okay, I get what it's doing, and I understand what it's going for, and I really like those elements and the overall mystery I'm quite into. So it's a really frustrating where I'm like, I just want it to get through this section as quick as possible and then see how I feel.
Okay. I suppose that was always kind of a possibility. I guess I am more positive then, in that I do actually like the sitcom elements. It's this weird thing. Maybe there's nostalgia from sitcoms from growing up or whatever, but the way it plays with the cheesy jokes, where there's an example early on in episode 1 where they've just moved into their house, and it follows that typical 50s, working husband, housewife dynamic, and he's getting ready for his work in the morning, and she's saying, oh, well, does this sound nice for breakfast? And she lists off very almost commercial-esque, the way she lists off, like, this great breakfast with all these different things, capped off with orange juice at the end. And he kind of goes, I think to that I say, I don't eat. And then she opens the fridge and goes, oh, that explains the empty refrigerator. Canned laughter. And there's canned laughter. That's part of the joke, is that there's canned laughter. And it's a really stupid, over-the-top, cheesy joke, but it kind of made me chuckle, because it was like, okay, they're taking the fact that he's a robot who doesn't, who has these powers and doesn't do anything, the fact that she has these, dare I say, witch-like abilities, and using them.
You may dare.
And using them in the context of a silly sitcom, because the trope that the first episode plays with, but I don't think it's too much of a spoiler. The core plot of the first episode, the core thing that it's about, is that there's a heart on the calendar to indicate that today is a special day for a reason. And the joke is that neither one of them can actually remember what they're supposed to be celebrating, so they kind of pretend to each other that they both know what it is. And she thinks it's one thing, but he discovers quite quickly that it's because he's invited his boss over for dinner, and that's what it's for. And she thinks it's a romantic thing. So you've got the inevitable clashing of those two, expectations coming together as the episode goes on.
Right.
And it's a very silly, tropey sitcom thing where most people in real life wouldn't have this weird thing where they just forget something like this. Like like the whole conceit that he forgets that this is what he's put on the thing for is a very tropey thing. Now, in the context of the show, there's several reasons why characters are just remembering and forgetting things at willy-nilly. There's a reason for it, I think, in the show itself. But
being unable to remember specific things is a pretty important part of the mystery.
But in the sitcoms that it's kind of parodying, that was something that happened a lot, is you'd have these goofy things where characters would just forget why they do, and they'd have this misunderstanding with each other.
Which it's kind of why it's so frustrating for me, because I understand exactly what they're doing, and I don't think it's bad in any way, what they're doing here. I think they're doing, they've got a creative choice that they wanted to do. We're parodying these things and we're going to do it in this meta way. And they succeed in what they're doing. It's just, for me, still frustrating to watch, because even though I understand what they're doing, it's still not enjoyable, if that makes sense. Like, I'm still like stuck with the, okay, you're doing the sitcom trope, and even though I see the layer above it, it's not engaging me enough.
I think there's enough subtext to a lot of the things that are going on in the sitcom stuff, which I can't even necessarily understand all of it yet, but there's definitely moments and ideas that make me think about, okay, what is this saying about what Wanda's going through? You know, because everything I'm pretty sure is just about what Wanda's going through, and there's a couple of big hints towards that, which we'll get into in a minute with spoilers. But I'm enjoying the sitcom parodying, and I don't think it could survive a whole season necessarily doing this exactly the thing, but it does kind of look like we're going to be advancing through different things, maybe till we get back to, you know, whatever reality is, you know, when we get there.
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, I have to say, I was like bored of the concept of this particular sitcom about halfway through the first episode, and I was kind of really hoping it would shift for episode 2, and when it didn't, I kind of like groaned a little bit.
I think episode 2
is the better for me.
I think episode 2 is legitimately very funny, so I don't share these complaints. But also, while we're on the subject, episode 2 does feature an actor from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Do you know what? I saw this like hours before I watched this. I saw that she was in it on my break. Someone on Twitter posted a screenshot and mentioned she was there, and I went, "Oh, god damn it! I'm gonna have to listen to this shit."
Yes. Emma Caulfield, of course, who played Anyanka on Buffy. Is in the second episode, maybe more for all I know. I don't know, but she's there for sure. So that was a nice. I didn't know she was in it. So it was building up to meeting this neighbor, this character, and then when she popped up, I'm like, and it's been a long time since I've seen her, right? So I mean, I'm like, you know, it's been probably like the last time I saw her something was probably like either just after Buffy or something in that range, which was like 50,
you're talking 15, 20 years.
15 years ago. So there was sort of a moment where I went, that kind of looks and sounds like Emma Caulfield. I think it is Emma Caulfield. But yeah, so I think we'll get into spoilers. I don't think we could talk about too much more without really getting into the meat and the hints and the mystery of it, because there is kind of a mystery level that's on top and some of the weird existential. One thing I will say, without getting into spoilers, one thing I will say that I really liked and I thought was very effective is it shot, you know, all these wide angles like a sitcom is, you know, it's presented as if it's been shot on a set that has no wall behind the camera, as if it's on a studio. And there's a moment in episode 1 where it stops doing that just for one scene, and because it's been shot this specific way the whole time, and accompanied admittedly with the tone of the moment that's happening, but because it goes into more traditional single camera close-ups with like shallow depth of field, and it feels so alien when it does it, that it really helps sort of go, okay, this is like part of reality breaking through. This is part of the thing falling apart.
And this is all the stuff that I do find genuinely engaging and interesting. This side of things I'm quite into, which I'm like, yeah, give me more of this stuff. And that's kind of what I hope a lot of it is going forward, as we get more of this stuff.
I mean, there's definitely more of it in episode 2 than 1. So I think that
there is,
the transitioning I feel will continue. So, and it is 9 episodes, so who knows, like, you know, where we're going to be. It is worth mentioning as well that the first episode is 30 minutes, but 7 minutes of that is credits. So the first episode really is only about 23 minutes.
Yeah, and this is the same as kind of what we got on Mandalorian, which obviously is the other big Disney Plus show that we've had. Is pretty comparable. That tended to have, you know, 4 to 7 minutes of credits as well. Yeah, depending on the episode.
None of those were as short as 23 minutes.
Oh, they were.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add except Mandalorian sucks. Let's move on. Let's get into spoilers then. So full spoilers for episode 1 and 2. I'll just say I really like these 2 episodes, and I'm actually happily quite excited to watch episode 3 next week. So yay. Thumbs up. Okay.
It can have half a thumbs up from me. Out of 1, not out of 2. Because you did 2 thumbs then.
Aye, okay, so Connor severed his finger, right? Note it down in the record.
It's possible to just, do half a thumb.
Yeah, but it's funnier for me to imagine you hacking off your thumb.
I bet it is.
So, alright, so spoilers then. Yeah, so the first episode, I suppose in terms of spoilers, we'll talk about some of the big moments and then maybe some of the jokes or whatever that we liked. If I'm just taking these two as kind of, they're both very separate plot-wise, but I think most of my funny moments are in the second one. But there's a side character that's become one of my early favourites, Mustache Man. So the gag, the
commie.
work.
Is that the commie? Or is that the other one?
Well, he's not actually a commie. He just
Yeah.
I think he just because Vision cracks a joke in second episode where he says, "Oh, so and so's a commie," and then they all pause in a really tense moment and then start laughing. It's just, but yeah.
I think it was the boss that also called him a Bolshevik as well. Which I think they are going to play with something along that line. That maybe he actually is.
Maybe they'll go down that path. But at least in the context of the scene, it was just a joke. Or maybe Vision was saying it dead seriously, and the joke is that everyone else just thinks he's joking. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
But he in episode 1 he gets fired from this company that Vision works for, and one of the other running gags is that in the first episode is that Vision has no idea what his company does. Like, he's really good at doing all the paperwork, and he has these big stacks of paper done. Yeah,
this is a really common meta joke, I think, with sitcoms. Like, even even non-meta sitcoms have kind of done this awareness of, who knows what their job is. Even something like Friends with Chandler's job did a big thing of this for a while. Where no one really knows what his job is. It's just there. So even the straightforward sitcoms have played with this joke, but this does it in a bit more of a meta way for sure.
Yeah, I like it in this because the joke's okay anyway. Generally, I don't mind the joke as a thing, but I think here it works really well because everything is made up, and because there's a point later on in the episode where neither of them can remember how they got married or where they moved from or anything like that. So the idea that even the generic work is not real. There's no point to it. There's nothing, because later on he's asking his boss, so these forms that I'm doing, like what do they actually help us achieve? And he's like, oh, they help us log our inputs and outputs. Just these answers that mean nothing. They're just like boring bureaucracy words. So
yeah, it's like it puts and outputs of what though?
Yes. Do we sell something? No. Do we buy something? No. Do we make something? No.
No.
Okay. But that was a joke with the mustache guy. He failed to have a good dinner for a home cooked meal for his boss. This is like a tradition. All the new employees have the boss over for dinner. And the joke is here is that it was so extravagant. The guy got him a string quartet for entertainment. Wife cooked a big huge meal.
It's like a 5-course thing.
Yeah, wasn't quite enough, and it wasn't enough. And he gets fired for it. And in episode 2, he has maybe my favorite joke line during the magic show, which really cracked me up. So part of the second episode is that they're going to a talent show and they're doing like a magic act, right? And they're ready to do like the classic box that hides someone so they can disappear, even though they can do it realistically. But the point is, it's meant to be fake, so they're doing it the fake way. And for reasons we'll get to in a bit, Vision is basically drunk, and the joke in the scene is that he keeps doing things with his powers that are real, and everyone has this moment where they're all suspicious for a second, which is really funny to me. The notion that someone's at a magic show, sees something impressive.
I've just remembered what line this is.
Sees something impressive and is suspicious until what? Because the joke is that Wanda keeps having to reveal how they've done the trick afterwards, so they're not suspicious. So she so for a start, he floats up and everyone's like, whoa, and then she sort of magics in like a zip line or whatever to.
It's a pulley system with a rope on it. Yeah.
But then the next thing he does is he picks up this piano, this big giant piano, and everyone's like, what? And Wanda's like, oh, it's an illusion. And she sort of waves her hand, and then when she pulls it away from it, it turns into just a cardboard cutout of a piano. But it cuts the mustache guy in the crowd, and everyone's like, oh, of course that's how they did it. It's just cardboard. And it cuts to him, and the crowd's like, that was my grandmother's piano. Yeah. It broke me. It was a funny line. He's the only person there that knows it's a real piano, and now it's gone.
You say that like they were all playing on it in the earlier acts as well.
True. Okay, whatever. The point, I don't know. It broke me. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a funny line. Anyway, so that's I mean, I think generally the comedy here when he's like drunk and he keeps using his powers and she's having to cover for him constantly. I thought was one of the funnier scenes across the 2 episodes. Joey was really reminded me of. He was giving me some serious, and the American listeners won't get this reference, but he was giving me some serious Rick Mail vibes.
Okay.
I was getting a lot of Rick Mail, especially in the way he was sort of pulling his face whenever he was doing this sort of like face read, put his lips back. I was getting a lot of Rick Mail from.
Yeah.
But I thought that was generally pretty amusing.
I will say on like these bits and them carrying, I think it helps that both of them are very good actors and are able to do. They've got range enough to do the comedic side of things and the dramatic side pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
Because I don't think either of their characters in the movies have really had to showcase much range.
Yeah, because obviously there were side characters. Nice to get them this spotlight, this chance to kind of flex things.
Yeah.
So I'll probably leave the comedy stuff there. There's some other things that I thought were amusing, but that was typically the humor stuff, which I did think was good. But the hints of the larger world, the moment we talked about in the first episode, where the camera work changes and it gets very serious, and even Wanda's. I was going to say Wanda's acting, that's still kind of true, but I kind of mean both Wanda and Olsen, but where the boss starts choking, and this is right after they've been struggling to remember where it was they moved from and when they got married, how they met, all that jazz. And he's like dying on the floor, and the wife's not even really caring or paying attention to it, so it starts to get kind of surreal even in that level, that she's not paying attention to him.
At the start of it, the wife, she's just going, stop it, because she thinks he's just like joking, like choking, making a joke of choking for whatever reason. And even though when it's getting worse and he's clearly struggling to breathe, she just keeps repeating, stop it, and like laughing over and over and over again.
Yeah. But this is where, the camera work changes, he's on the floor dying, and Wanda's tone goes away from the sitcom. And it's just one word. She just, or one sentence, she says, Vision, help him, or Vision, stop this, or but it's very stern, and it's very clear that this is real Wanda making course correcting this. And this was kind of the hint, because I wasn't really sure necessarily, like, is this a place where Wanda's created for herself because she's dealing with stuff, or is this something someone else has put her into? This, and especially the end of episode 2, implies that it's her, that this is her world.
I thought the same. I thought this was a hint that at least she had some control, or if not outright, the creation of it. But the moment in the second episode pretty clearly feels like it's pointing towards this is her creation. Yeah,
it's very good stuff, and it's funny actually because I've not read Tom King's Vision, and I don't know how closely this follows anything, but this still felt very Tom King. Just the general concept of what's happening feels like a couple of issues of a Tom King comic book.
I read it last month when I had no computer, and I've owned it for like 2 years and just not got around to it, and I was like, screw it, I'm reading it.
I own it too. I've had it for like 3 years.
Yeah, it's wonderful. By the way, it's possibly my favorite Tom King, 12-issue miniseries.
Bold statement, but
yeah, sure. I'm aware of that. It's very good. This is less like it than I was expecting. Like there's very little plot shared, barring just they're in a house in like the suburbs sort of area, right? But tone, I think it's kind of on a similar line for sure.
I definitely feel the tone.
I think the biggest difference is this is clearly Wanda's show more than anything.
Yeah.
Whereas Vision, the book, as the name implies, is more his book.
Yeah. So that was kind of your big element of episode 1. Episode 2 goes into the mystery stuff a little bit more. Obviously, at the very end of the episode, there's the fake credits for the sitcom, but then it pulls out, and there's someone in the real world, and the cinematic aspect ratio and color watching this on a TV screen.
Yes, and, with I believe a sword logo on the screen.
Yeah. Swords. Which is not something I would typically recognize. I'm not really that familiar with sword as a Marvel concept.
I am mainly thanks to Kieran Gillen, and that's about it.
The rest of the end of episode 2, so there's like a beekeeper looking dude who comes out of the sewer, and I think that's someone from AIM. and I don't know a lot about AIM, but for some reason the visual of this dude made me think that's AIM.
I know, I get where you're coming from. If you imagine it in yellow,
yes,
I can see it.
Because I'm black and white, obviously, when this happens. So
right, and it's a beekeeper outfit. They tend to be white anyway. But
they do, yes.
If I imagine that as more of a yellow hazmat-y looking suit, which doesn't take much tweaking, yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from. I don't know if you're right, but I can see where you're coming from.
I imagine a yellow would look more white in black and white than it would black. So
I mean, it would definitely be closer to that. Yes.
Yes. Well, because red looks black, so certain colors look,
Yeah, but yellow is quite a pale, bright color, isn't it?
So, yeah, that's a big thing. So one of the weird things in episode 2, or one of the interesting things, is that there's a lot of noise at the start when they're in bed, and it's notably twin beds, because classic sitcom, until she, puts them together, because magic. But they hear some noises, and it's played for laughs, but the next day she finds like a toy helicopter in the bushes, but it's in color, which very much implies this is from outside this world. Something's invaded this world.
There's some key moments of color in this episode, which
there is actually one in episode 1 as well.
In episode 1,
it's very subtle. It's one very minor thing.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's interesting. What I was going to say is, on face value, the color seems to represent different things in the different moments.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously here the helicopter, it implies reality, right? But there's the moment where the neighbor cuts her hand, and obviously while there's some reality moments surrounding that, it's the actual cut that is bright red, and that doesn't feel like it's telling us that she's real or anything like that.
I think it's more to I would argue that's more to do with trauma as in the blood and whatever she's pushing down. If it's not indeed the death of Vision and her PTSD after the events of the movies. Which
is my main suspicion right now.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have anything else to really suspect unless something else after that we're going to discover as the mystery unfolds.
Which is possible.
Which has specifically triggered this, forgive the word, episode. So, the moment of colour in the first episode is actually in the ad, because there's like a fake ad in both episodes, which is notable because the same two actors are in both ads, even though they're for very different things, and both of them seem to be a reference to something in Wanda's life. The first one is for a Stark toaster, and of course, if you remember the movies, it was Stark's missiles that ruined her country and killed various family members and stuff, her parents notably. And then the second ad is for a Strucker watch, and Strucker was the evil, scientist for Hydra. And there's even a Hydra logo on the watch.
It's a Hydra logo, which I did quite like that.
And he's the one who was experimenting on her and her brother. And part of me is wondering, if we're going to get to the end of this, are we going to get a cameo from the Quicksilver actor in some way? Because I mean, if this is a fake world that she's creating, it's not that weird if she conjures her brother up at some point.
No, not at all. And I don't think that's an impossible suggestion at all.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere that Bettany was implying that there is one or two big cast members that they've kept hidden that are going to show up later in the season.
There's one, I mean, I don't know how announced it was, but I was checking a couple of names on IMDb earlier, and there is one relatively notable actress from previous Marvel movies with 5 episodes listed. She hasn't shown up yet, but I don't know how announced that was, or if they've just kind of...
Well, there is one notable person in episode 2 that's not from previous movies. Well, the character technically isn't a previous movie, but the actress isn't, because it's a very different age.
No, this is the same actress.
Okay. Yeah, so... And this is actually a theory that I've seen online with the helicopter, is that the helicopter represents her coming to this world, and she's actually here to try and either break Wanda out of this or something. But... I don't know what name she's given in episode 2. I can't remember. She has some fake name, but she's Monica Rambeau. She's the daughter of the character from Captain Marvel, who is Captain Marvel's best friend or whatever. I've not read the comics for this stuff, but I remember her little girl grows up, and in present day she becomes kind of more the friend of Captain Marvel, and she's a pilot and stuff. So, and I think presumably she may be working for SWORD. If SWORD are the ones who are trying to break her out of this.
Right, and because that's the key thing, the bit on the radio where we get the message to her is Wanda, who's doing this to you?
Mm-hmm.
They presumably don't realize that she's doing this. I mean, it's possible there is someone manipulating her into doing this. That is also possible.
Yeah,
but I think that's maybe less interesting.
I actually think it may be a mixture of both. Given if we're suspecting the guy at the end of the episode 2 who comes out of the sewer, right? And this is where Wanda says no.
The beekeeper, yeah.
Yeah, the beekeeper. Says no and rewinds. Let's assume that he is from AIM, or if not AIM, some other evil company, organization in the Marvel universe. It would suggest to me that she does have control of whatever she's doing, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's kind of a fight from both sides to try and wake her up, because maybe her body is actually somewhere bad. Maybe like someone else has put her to sleep and she's like doing all this in her head and she's happy to stay in this world because of what she's going through, but there is someone benefiting from this who's trying to like mine her head or trying to manipulate her, or maybe even do more experiments on her. It wouldn't surprise me. So the idea that Sword or someone from the good side has like somehow sent Monica in, right? That's what the toy helicopter represents. Again, how this physically makes sense, I'm sure it'll be quite,
I think right now it's best not to think about that too much, because we are dealing it with essentially an imaginary world by someone who can magic shit up no problem.
Yes.
So, the rules of physics are a little bit wavy here.
Because I think it's notable you don't see her until after the helicopter. And her being a pilot, I think it stands out. Yeah, and also because it's a 50s sitcom, I think it also kind of stands out that she's black. Whereas because every other character is white, unless I'm forgetting anyone. But
not that I can think of.
Yeah, and I think that's very intentional because it might be a 50s sitcom, and 50s sitcoms typically.
I mean, you could argue even Vision is an interesting look at that. In that, as you point out, red shows up in black and white as black, right?
True.
So when he's in his real form, he looks closer to black, whereas then he puts on the suit, the face to go out, and he's white.
He's Paul Bettany. Yeah. Well, that's actually exactly. One of the key themes I was thinking. So even before we started getting hints of what was really going on, one of the big themes that I was getting from this, which does tie into Wanda's character being experimented on, being not like a normal person, and Vision too as well, obviously because he's such a weird like thing in terms of how he's created.
A strange being.
Yeah. But the idea of conforming, the idea of trying to blend in, and the whole episode's about trying to pretend they're a normal couple and try to pretend they're a normal human white couple in 50s. They're not communists, they're not weird, they do have a proper backstory, they're pretending to have one, and so much of it's about being the normal businessman, being the normal housewife. We have to keep up this appearance at all costs, and I think that ties into just being in the 50s. It ties into her character, and it ties into the idea of like the sitcom, which is why maybe until they started hinting that she had some control, one might think that this is someone else's world that's enforcing it upon her. But even if she is in control, it kind of makes some sense that in her world she has achieved like the disguise of being normal, and this is kind of the over the top achieving the blending in is the 50s sitcom where everyone's always happy and everything's all hijinks and there's no pain in this world. There's no pain in a 50s sitcom, not really.
No, definitely not.
And that's why this is appealing to her. This is why it's the dream and the fantasy she's in. And of course things just kind of, she gives them wedding rings at the end of episode 1, end of episode 2, just before the rewind moment, she's suddenly pregnant, and it's like, oh, is this really happening? And then when they rewind it, after she rewinds it after the villain makes his appearance, if that's indeed what he is, because they could swerve and it turns out he's actually alright.
Yeah, that's the thing. She's terrified of him. That's why she rewinds it. But it could be more whoever it is represents reality that she's running from, right? Yeah. It doesn't actually mean that they're a bad person.
It could just present itself as a villain from her point of view because this is trying to take her away from her world. So that's definitely a possibility. Yeah. But when she rewinds it, then because the end of the episode clearly shows that next episode we're going to be in color. We're switching to color 4x3, maybe implying we're going to the 60s or the 70s in terms of style.
I would think that's a reasonable assumption.
Which might imply that the kids will be born. Just it's almost representing like, okay, now the kids are maybe 10 or something.
It's possible. We might do one episode of the pregnancy and do typical sitcom pregnancy jokes. I
mean, it could do anything. It could jump ahead to when they're teenagers. It could not. Yeah. It really can do anything at once. It's kind of the beauty of the concept.
It's got a lot of free reign here.
Yeah. So that stuff's really good, and the creepy voice as well on the radio early on. When Anya's there, and the music plays and the music's kind of weird, and Anya kind of stops and goes, "Wait, what is this?" And she looks right at her and goes, "Who are you?" And it's, you know, again, that fear of being found out that you don't belong is, I think, again, this constant theme that's playing throughout the episodes.
Yeah.
But no, I dug it.
This is the thing. I love this conversation. I love this side of it. I just the actual package it was wrapped up in of the you know, the sitcom elements, wasn't really enjoying watching those parts. But I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I'll stick through it and get the good stuff out of it. You know, it's mercifully short episodes. If these were like an hour long, you know, I think I'd struggle a lot more.
I don't think that's the thing. I don't think they'd ever be an hour. I think part of the reason why they're the length they are is because they know what format they're doing.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Well, and this is why I was very careful what I said at the start. I don't think they're making any mistakes. I don't think this is bad. Even the sitcom elements that weren't working for me and I found kind of grating to watch, I think they're working exactly as intended. I'm just not enjoying them. But I do think they're doing the right thing for what they're aiming for.
Yeah. So, I'm intrigued. Given that we've got these recurring ads, though, I do think we're keeping the TV show format, even if we're changing exactly what era of sitcom we're in, and maybe we might even change what genre. I mean, it may not be a sitcom, but if things get scarier, maybe they'll switch to, like, when they get to the 90s, maybe it'll become more of a monster show or something. Like, I don't know.
It's very possible, but you know, like I say, sitcoms have changed a lot over the decades.
Yeah.
So it is very possible that, you know, we will just stick with sitcom and explore it through that lens.
You can do this for any kind of, like, consistent thing. Like, I've seen people do this with horror movies. Like, looking at horror movies through the decades, like, what does that say about where we were as a society and what was affecting people, right? You can do the same with sitcoms. You can easily say, okay, analysing what sitcoms were like in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, 90s, 2000s, like, what changed in the world as going through that? What the sensibilities?
It's very easy, yeah.
So, I mean, that is definitely something that is there, and that might play into building her back up, because, you know, maybe we'll go through all the eras, and when we get to present days, when she'll be back.
The kind of the assumption is by the end of the show, she's dealt with, you know, the loss or whatever else it is that may have been that's triggered this, you know, and is ready to be, you know, Wanda again. Now,
this is cool. Also, I do have to mention as well the black heart on the calendar, which, you know, represents Mr. Hardy's boss. So that's the joke. But I would never have known this. This is just stuff I've read because, you know, MCU stuff and learning about new things that we'd never know about. Apparently, the running theory is this is teasing the villain for the second Doctor Strange, because it meant, you know, in-depth Marvel readers recognize this as a hint of something.
Okay, and I do remember a lot of comments from various producers or whoever was involved, writers, kind of saying that this show and the next Doctor Strange maybe are pretty intrinsically linked, more than people would have ever expected, I think.
Yeah, I think some people are also speculating the villain Mephisto, because that villain's been tied to Scarlet Witch before in the comics. And apparently in the Loki trailer, there's a hint of Mephisto. So they might even be playing with an idea of building up a villain over several of the shows that will either pay off in a movie or something.
Mephisto is pretty fun to deal with, I think. Especially on like this sort of scale and dealing with, like, you know, bargains and, you know, it's basically the devil, right? It's essentially what Mephisto is.
Yeah, in fact, you just reminded me of my line of dialogue in this. And it's played off as just a sitcom line in the episode. But it's when they're at the meeting with Annie, because Annie has been even mentioned about her character. She's like the kind of the perfect housewife who's really mean to everyone else if they're not the perfect housewife as well. She's running the committee for the talent show, which actually, that's the other thing, is when they're doing the talent show and they're saying it's for the children, there was something oddly sinister about the way they all went, for the children, as if, like, what do you mean? That doesn't sound like you're actually just giving kids stuff. Sounds sinister.
It was, and you know, the repeat, you know, you get those hot fuzz, greater good vibes.
Yeah. Yes, the greater good. But no, the line I was reminded of is the friendly neighbor, who's the actress that I know from a bunch of shit. She's sort of, what's her face?
There's
Catherine
a lot of familiar actors and actresses in this, I think.
Yeah, Catherine Hahn is the neighbor. She's popped up in a bunch of shit, but she pops, you know, leans over or something. One of them says the devil's in the details, and she says, well, that's not the only place either, or something like that. It's along those lines. And the joke in the scene is that she's kind of referring to Anya as the devil, but I think it actually might be kind of a wink to the audience that there's a genuine devil going around, whether it's Mephisto or something else.
It's very possible, yeah. You could be on something there.
Felt intentional to me, but yeah, because the line stuck. Even though I didn't know what villains it might have been teasing, that line really. It was one of those like David Lynch moments to go back to David Lynch where you're watching Twin Peaks and there'll be a line of dialogue that it's not about the bunny, is it? Is it about the bunny? No, it's not about the bunny.
Yeah, no, there is sometimes those lines that are just said slightly differently, or the shot just is slightly off that makes you aware that no, this is important.
So no, I think what's interesting, and obviously this was 2 episodes rather than 1. But I do think it's interesting that even if you have this just to represent the length of 1 episode in terms of our reviews, given the sitcom format, it's interesting how much like hints and teases and a mysteries going on, that there is stuff to talk about. The only thing I'll say is, and maybe this could be construed as a minor spoiler, and I do mean very minor, but the actress who plays Monica Rambeau, who's here as another character in this episode, I noted that she's in obviously more episodes, but she's actually credited as Monica Rambeau for the rest of the episode she's in. So that would suggest that there's some acknowledgement of who she is.
Yeah.
In some capacity going forward, which I think at least means, at the very least, she will be a character who's aware that they're in a fake world and might become kind of a conduit for the audience in some way. Or if not that, then be the exciting sort of like weird, wacky third-party element who's trying to break things away from what they are or something,
Okay, that makes sense.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're not feeling the sitcom tropes as much, that's another wrench in the format that will start to make you feel different.
Kind of what I'm looking forward to is breaking the format and doing the other stuff. I know I actually sound very similar to a lot of people did early in The Mandalorian, where they wanted it to be this overarching thing, and it ended up being very just, here's your episode, right? And it is very much played into the old, just, it's a serial episode style thing. But because I was having fun with the episode being just an episode, I was okay with that. So I don't want to be hypocritical and be like, oh no, I don't want this to be that. If this is what the show is, that's great. I respect that choice, and I seem to be in the minority of people with this feeling from what quick cursory glance, people seem to be loving this.
I would argue, though, just on that point, though, that while the sitcom part is very episodic, I would argue that this is... Because I did watch season 1 of Mandalorian, for everyone at home. I'm cracking some jokes about it, but I did watch season 1. I would argue that this has, even just from these 2 episodes, feels more serialized than the general feeling I got from that show when I was watching it.
Definitely season 1. Less so season 2, I would say. Season 2 was... much more. Yeah, obviously you didn't see that, so it's fine. I'm not holding you responsible for that. I'm just clarifying for the audience.
Season 2 could just be a movie cut into 9 parts for all I know. I don't care. But season 1,
it's not that.
Definitely felt like it ignored what could have been the overall plot just for individual stories. Whereas this, even though technically the sitcom's doing individual things, the actual ongoing mysteries, it feels like because we already got more than 2 than we did in 1. I suspect that 3 will have even more than 2 did, and it's going to be something that's
possibility that in either like episode 3 or 4 we pull away from like the mystery stuff almost entirely, and it's like her kind of in denial and retreating back into the world, and it's like no, she's throwing up the world stronger than ever. Well, so it's like almost all sitcom. And
I think that's the pregnancy thing at the end of episode 2, is that it's just as it's starting to be broken, she doubles down. And how do you double down? You double down by going further with it and having the kids and having... Yeah, and there was some like references to kids. There's a couple of characters who asked them, do you get having kids? Oh, you're thinking about preschools? You're thinking about this? There was lines kind of poking her in that direction before, but no, I dug it. And if this is kind of the level, and I think it's interesting that Falcon Winter Soldiers, which I think is coming basically after this.
Given the dates because they're going to give us rough months. I'd say it's within a week or 2 at most, if not the following week.
But that's clearly going to be so different from this, because that looks like it's going to be almost a more traditional MCU story.
It does look pretty traditional, MCU action adventure buddy cop, right?
Yeah, which could be interesting to see how that format works, because this has been adapted into sort of like a faux sitcom for the purpose that it's doing. Whereas I'll be interested to see how do they break up that into a series and have it feel like an action adventure with these 2 characters who were very likeable, had good chemistry. But I'm curious to see what they did with that.
It's interesting. Just before we did the show, I was talking with someone and we worked out. It looks like they could have, maybe a week or two between each show, but there could be a Marvel show every week of this year. That's
basically an accident because some of them were supposed to come out last year, but because they got pushed and things got pushed back, they might be in a situation there where they have almost a weekly Marvel show.
Yeah, because we have this, then Falcon Winter Soldier, Loki's pretty much right after that. Then there's the What If, which is a little bit different because that's the animated kind of thing. But then that should take us up to roughly end of August, mid-September, give or take. Obviously, we don't have exact dates. Was it the end of What If?
No, I'm saying, is that when Loki hits August, September?
No, Loki's after Falcon and Winter Soldier. That's like May time.
Oh, okay. All right. So what's after What If?
But we've got Miss Marvel and Hawkeye both being told late 2021. So
okay.
I don't know which way around they'll be, but yeah, give or take.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to both of those, actually.
Overall, I'm very interested / excited for Loki and Hawkeye. Pretty interested in Miss Marvel.
What's funny is that Loki's by far the one I'm the least interested in.
That trailer, he's DB Cooper. Oh, yes, please. So I'm very interested in that.
It may be great, but it's just for whatever reason, the idea of a Loki show is just the least appealing to me.
Yeah, so. What If is by far the least interesting.
Okay.
I don't care about that.
I'm not counting What If in that because I'm just kind of ignoring What If. But
right. To me, the least interesting one is Falcon and Winter Soldier, and not to say it's going to be bad, but it looks the most typical MCU.
It does.
And I'm not really kind of into that for the most part.
We haven't had a new MCU entry though in
a while,
a year and a half, probably 2 years by the time that comes out. Actually, so
depends when with Spider-Man if you're counting that.
I suppose that was July 20. So it'll be closer to 2 years than anything else.
Yeah, it will. I'll give you that.
So I'm actually kind of excited just to enjoy a popcorn bit of Marvel again. It's been a while.
No, I get that appeal for a lot of people.
And the only Marvel-esque things I've watched were the last couple of Fox. I saw both Dark Phoenix and New Mutants in the last few months, and
do you know what's really funny? I've seen both of those. Dark Phoenix I saw a while back, but New Mutants just last month, I think. Really not good. Still haven't seen the last Spider-Man film.
I think the sad thing about New Mutants is that I actually can see the good movie in there. Because it's not the train. Because Dark Phoenix is just a complete and utter mess of a train wreck. It is absolutely like somehow it's worse than The Last Stand. I don't know how they accomplished that, but it's worse than The Last Stand. New Mutants is really bland, but I can see the good. Like if things just worked better, and if it was just a bit better written, and there was just a bit more of that, I could see how it would be great, and it just isn't there, and it's annoying. Anyway. You look forward to myself and Tim's review of New Mutants sometime in May on Streams After Midnight, our horror movie podcast. But yeah, that is Scarlet Witch. We'll be back next week.
It's WandaVision.
WandaVision. That's a fair slip, right? We'll be back next week with WandaVision episode 3. For the record, I'd have been back anyway, even if Connor said he wasn't going to. But he sounds like
there's enough here to keep me interested to stick around.
Yes. I wonder if we'll get 2 of the next format, or if now things are going to ramp up. Because I think they wanted to have like a really... Because the first episode is very tight, just the sitcom, more or less. Whereas episode 2, because it's sort of starting to get into other things, is a bit more than that. So I wonder if we just get 1 of each format now, kind of thing.
It's possible, yeah. And, we've only got 7 more, so they got to move through them at a bit of a pace eventually.
Yes. The question is does it all play out in our head, barring little snippets here or there, or are we actually going to get an episode or 2 at the end where we're out in the real world and get like that kind of thing?
I can see 1 episode, maybe even just half an episode, but I'm not expecting that much of it. But I could be wrong.
We'll see. We'll see what it does. But yeah, that's a solid start though to these Marvel shows that are actually tied to the MCU. And if
I'm just glad of how unique it feels and how un-MCU it feels.
Yeah. So there you go. That is WandaVision episodes 1 and 2. Let us know what you thought of the episodes in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. It's very important on YouTube to do so. So if you did enjoy the discussion and want to see more, please do hit the like button. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses and keep all the content coming. So go and have a look at that. Catch us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?